I never imagined that flying 12 hours from London to Portland, Oregon would lead to the most terrifying discovery of my life. Clutching a bouquet of yellow roses for my mom's 65th birthday celebration, I approached the familiar blue door of my childhood home on Maple Street. We had planned this visit for weeks, coordinating time zones and flight schedules. A woman I had never seen before answered the door, her blonde hair perfectly styled and cold blue eyes studying me with suspicion. She wore expensive diamond earrings and spoke with disturbing confidence when she said, "I live here. I don't know your mom." My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone, the roses falling to the wooden porch steps. This had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe I had the wrong address, even though I had lived in this house for 18 years before moving to London for my marketing job. "Mom, it's me, Carrie," I said when she answered on the first ring. "Did you move? There's a stranger at your house who says she lives there." "No, honey, I didn't move," my mother Susan replied, her voice filled with confusion. "I'm at home waiting for you. Where are you?" The blonde woman who had been listening to my conversation stepped closer. "I'm Patricia Reynolds," she announced, pulling out a thick manila folder. "I purchased this property 3 months ago. Here are the legal documents." I stared at the official-looking papers she thrust toward me. The sale was dated March 15th, and there was my mother's signature at the bottom of multiple pages. The selling price was listed as $250,000, far below the home's actual value of nearly $400,000. "This is impossible," I whispered, scanning the documents. "My mom would never sell this house. She's lived here for 30 years. Patricia shrugged, her expression remaining cold and businesslike. "Perhaps your mother forgot to mention it. Elderly people sometimes have memory issues." The insult stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. I asked my mother for her current address, writing down the information with growing dread. The location she gave me was completely unfamiliar. 20 minutes later, I found myself standing outside Riverside Apartments, a run-down complex near the industrial district. The paint was peeling, the parking lot was cracked, and the smell of garbage hung in the air. This couldn't be where my vibrant, house-proud mother was living. Apartment 12B was on the second floor. When my mom opened the door, my heart shattered. She looked smaller somehow, her gray hair uncombed, and her face drawn with exhaustion. Behind her, I could see a tiny studio apartment with a kitchenette, a fold-out couch, and barely enough space for her belongings. "Carrie!" she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I've missed you so much. I'm sorry about the confusion with the house." "Mom, what happened? Why are you living here?" She led me inside, gesturing helplessly at the cramped space. "That nice woman Patricia helped me with some paperwork a few months ago. She said it would be better for me to live somewhere smaller, easier to manage. She arranged everything." "What paperwork?" I asked, my stomach churning with dread. Susan pulled out a shoebox filled with documents from under the couch. Her hands shook as she sorted through them. "I don't really understand it all. Patricia said it was complicated legal stuff about taxes and medical expenses. She brought me medicine for my arthritis and helped me fill out forms." I examined the papers, recognizing some as property transfer documents, others as medical forms I had never seen before. My mother's signature appeared on page after page, but the handwriting looked shaky and uncertain, completely different from her usual confident script. "Mom, do you remember signing all of these?" She pressed her fingers to her temples, looking confused and frightened. "Patricia said it was important. She was so helpful, visiting me every week, bringing groceries and medicine. She said she used to take care of her own elderly mother. Where's your savings account? Your emergency fund?" Susan's face crumpled. "Patricia helped me move the money to a new bank. She said it would earn better interest. But when I tried to check on it last week, the bank said the account was closed." I felt sick. "How much money, Mom?" $87,000, she whispered. "Everything your father and I saved over 40 years. The room began spinning. My mother had been systematically robbed, her house stolen, her life savings taken, and she had been manipulated into cooperating with her own destruction. The woman I had always known as sharp and independent had been reduced to living in poverty, confused and afraid. "We're going to fix this," I promised, though I had no idea how. "We're going to get your house back and find out what really happened." As I held my mother in that cramped, depressing apartment, I realized that Patricia Reynolds had made the worst mistake of her life. She had targeted the wrong family, because I wasn't going to let anyone destroy my mother's life and get away with it. The next morning, I started my investigation by searching online for any information about Patricia Reynolds. What I found sent chills down my spine. There were no social media profiles, no business listings, no public records that matched the woman who had stolen my mother's house. I decided to trace the paper trail, starting with the medical documents in my mother's shoebox. One form caught my attention, a discharge summary from Sunset Memory Care Facility dated April 2nd. My mother had never mentioned being in a nursing home. "Mom, were you ever at a place called Sunset Memory Care?" Susan looked genuinely puzzled. "I don't think so, honey. I would remember that." The facility was located 15 miles outside Portland. I drove there immediately, my heart pounding with each mile. The building was modern and expensive-looking, surrounded by manicured gardens and security cameras. At the front desk, I explained that I was Susan Martinez's daughter and needed information about her stay. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes named Jennifer, checked the computer system. "I'm sorry, but I can't provide patient information without proper authorization," she said. "Please," I begged. "My mother has no memory of being here, and I think something terrible has happened to her." Jennifer glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "Let me get Nurse Williams. She might be able to help you." Nurse Williams was an African-American woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense attitude and gentle demeanor. When I explained the situation, her expression darkened. "I remember your mother," she said quietly. "She was brought in by a woman claiming to be her daughter. Patricia something. But your mother kept insisting she had a daughter in London named Carrie." "That's me," I said, showing her my passport. "What happened during her stay?" Williams led me to a small office and closed the door. "Your mother was heavily sedated when she arrived. The woman who brought her had medical documents stating she had severe dementia and needed immediate care. But something felt wrong." "Wrong how?" "When the sedation wore off, your mother was completely coherent. She knew the date, the president's name, her address, everything. She kept asking why she was there and demanding to go home. But the woman, Patricia, insisted she was having a good day and that her lucidity wouldn't last." My hands clenched into fists. "Did you examine the medical records?" "That's the thing," Williams said, pulling out a thick file. "Dr. Thompson signed off on the admission, but he told me privately that he never personally examined your mother. He relied entirely on the medical history provided by Patricia." I studied the documents in the file. The diagnosis was signed by a Dr. Richard Hoffman, but when I looked closer, the medical license number didn't match the signature. "This is fake," I whispered. Williams nodded grimly. "I suspected as much. I've been a nurse for 28 years, and I can usually tell when someone has dementia. Your mother showed no signs whatsoever." "How long was she here?" 2 weeks. Patricia visited every day, always bringing some kind of medication she claimed was prescribed by your mother's regular doctor. After taking it, your mother would become drowsy and confused for several hours. The pieces were falling into place. Patricia had drugged my mother to make her appear mentally incapacitated, then used that as justification for taking control of her affairs. What happened when she left? Patricia came with discharge papers, claiming she had arranged private care for your mother. Your mother was groggy from the medication, but she looked terrified. She grabbed my hand and whispered that she didn't want to go with Patricia. "But you had to release her?" Williams looked devastated. "The paperwork was all in order. Patricia had power of attorney documents. I reported my concerns to my supervisor, but nothing came of it." Before leaving, Williams showed me security footage from the day my mother was admitted. On the grainy video, I watched Patricia practically carrying my confused, sedated mother through the entrance. My mother's legs were unsteady, her head lolling to one side, clearly under the influence of something. But in footage from a week later, when the medication had worn off, my mother appeared alert and frightened. She was trying to explain something to Williams, gesturing emphatically, obviously in distress. "I should have done more," Williams said, tears in her eyes. "I knew something was wrong, but the legal documents seemed legitimate." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "Patricia fooled everyone, but now we're going to stop her." As I drove back to my mother's tiny apartment, my phone rang. It was Susan, and she sounded panicked. "Carrie, that woman Patricia is here. She says she needs to discuss some additional paperwork with me. I told her you were handling everything now, but she insists on talking to me alone." Don't let her in, Mom. Don't sign anything, don't take any medicine from her, and don't go anywhere with her. She's very persistent, honey. She says it's about getting my house back. My blood ran cold. Patricia was making another move, probably realizing that I was getting too close to the truth. I'm on my way. Do not open that door. I pushed my rental car to its limits, racing through Portland traffic. Patricia was escalating the situation, which meant she was either desperate or confident enough to try something bold. Either way, my mother was in immediate danger from a woman who had already proven she was capable of elaborate, heartless crimes. I arrived at my mother's apartment complex to find Patricia's silver BMW parked outside. Through the window of apartment 12B, I could see two figures sitting at the small table. My heart pounded as I took the stairs, two at a time. "Mom!" I called out, knocking firmly on the door. Patricia answered, her cold smile more menacing than friendly. "Carrie, how wonderful to finally meet you properly. Your mother and I were just finishing up some important business." I pushed past her into the apartment. My mother sat at the table looking dazed, a pen in her hand and several documents spread before her. "What's going on here?" I demanded. "Just helping Susan with some insurance matters," Patricia replied smoothly. There were a few details we needed to clarify about her previous residence. I snatched the papers from the table before my mother could sign them. They were insurance claim forms stating that Susan had abandoned her property willingly due to mental incapacity and was therefore not entitled to any compensation for damages or loss. "Get out," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Get out now, and don't ever come near my mother again." Patricia's facade finally slipped, revealing the calculating predator underneath. "You're making a big mistake, Carrie. There are legal ramifications to interfering with properly executed contracts. The only mistake here was yours. You picked the wrong family." After Patricia left, muttering vague threats about lawsuits, I helped my mother to the couch. She was clearly under the influence of something again, struggling to keep her eyes open. "Did she give you anything to drink or any medication?" I asked. "Just some tea," Susan mumbled. "Said it would help with my anxiety about the legal stuff." I immediately called 911, then drove my mother to the emergency room. Blood tests confirmed my suspicions. She had been dosed with a mild sedative, probably dissolved in her tea. While waiting for the results, I contacted attorney Michael Johnson, whose name I found through an online search for elder abuse lawyers. Johnson agreed to meet with us the next day and advised me to gather every document related to my mother's case. That evening, I spread everything out on Susan's small table and began organizing the evidence. The power of attorney documents were sophisticated forgeries, but they contained subtle errors that revealed their fraudulent nature. The notary signature belonged to someone named David Chen, and the witness signatures were clearly fake. Johnson met us at a coffee shop downtown the next morning. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and serious eyes who specialized in financial elder abuse cases. "This is one of the most elaborate schemes I've seen," he said after reviewing the documents. "Your mother wasn't just robbed. She was systematically targeted and manipulated over months." "Can we get her house back?" I asked. "It's complicated. The current occupant, Patricia Reynolds, has legal documents that appear valid on the surface. We'll need to prove fraud, which requires demonstrating that your mother was not mentally competent to make these decisions, or that she was coerced." Johnson pulled out his laptop and began typing. "I'm running Patricia Reynolds through several databases. If she's done this before, there might be other victims." Within minutes, his search revealed disturbing patterns. Patricia Reynolds doesn't exist as a legal entity before last year, but I'm finding similar cases involving Patricia Richardson and Patricia Robinson in nearby counties. He showed me case files involving 3 other elderly victims. Each had lost their homes and savings through nearly identical methods: befriending lonely seniors, gradually gaining their trust, drugging them during crucial legal proceedings, and using forged documents to steal their assets. "Look at this," Johnson said, pointing to his screen. Patricia Richardson convinced an 80-year-old widower named Harold Chen to sign over his property in Eugene. Patricia Robinson did the same thing to a 73-year-old woman named Margaret Foster in Salem. The names made my blood run cold. Chen and Foster were the same surnames as the notary and real estate agent listed on my mother's fraudulent documents. "She's working with accomplices," I realized. "This isn't just one person. It's an organized criminal network." Johnson nodded grimly. David Chen is a notary public in Eugene who was suspended last year for irregularities. Linda Foster is a real estate agent in Salem with multiple complaints against her license. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out the network's operations. Patricia used different identities in different counties to avoid detection. She targeted recently widowed seniors with valuable properties and minimal family support. Her accomplices provided the legal framework to make the thefts appear legitimate. "How many people has she stolen from?" Susan asked, finally beginning to understand the scope of what had happened to her. "Based on what I'm seeing here, at least 5 confirmed victims, possibly more. The total theft is over $2 million in properties and cash." Johnson's phone rang. After a brief conversation, he turned to us with grave news. That was a colleague in Washington County. Patricia is currently targeting an elderly man named George Thompson. His guardianship hearing is scheduled for tomorrow, and his property transfer is set for this weekend. My heart sank. While we had been investigating Patricia's past crimes, she was preparing to destroy another family. "We have to stop her," I said. "The police need concrete evidence to make arrests," Johnson explained. "Right now we have suspicions and patterns, but Patricia's documentation appears legal on the surface. She's been very careful to cover her tracks." "What about the drugging? The fake medical records?" "Those are harder to prove after the fact. We need to catch her in the act." As we left the coffee shop, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. My mother's case was just one part of a larger criminal operation that was destroying families across Oregon. Patricia and her network were about to claim another victim, and the legal system was too slow to stop them. I realized that if George Thompson was going to be saved, if my mother was going to get justice, if this criminal network was going to be stopped, I would have to find a way to take matters into my own hands. Johnson arranged for me to meet with the families of Patricia's other victims at his office the next morning. What I learned there shattered any remaining faith I had in the system's ability to protect vulnerable seniors. Harold Chen's daughter, Maria, had flown in from Denver when her father stopped returning her calls. She found him living in a boarding house, confused and afraid, with no memory of selling his house to Patricia Richardson. "Dad kept talking about a helpful woman who brought him soup and medicine," Maria explained. "He said she was like a daughter to him, always looking out for his health and finances." Margaret Foster's son, Robert, had discovered his mother's situation purely by accident when a neighbor called to report suspicious activity at her house. "Mom was found wandering downtown in her nightgown, claiming someone had stolen her house," Robert said. "The police thought she was having a mental episode. It took weeks to realize she was telling the truth." Both families had tried to work through legal channels, but Patricia had disappeared before they could take action. The properties had been quickly resold to unsuspecting buyers, making recovery nearly impossible. "She studies her targets carefully," Maria explained. "Dad said Patricia knew everything about him, his wife's favorite flowers, his military service, his grandchildren's names. She made him feel like she genuinely cared about him." Johnson had been investigating further and made a disturbing discovery. Patricia doesn't work alone. She's part of a network that includes a corrupt court-appointed guardian named Janet Morrison. He showed us Morrison's credentials and case history. Morrison has been appointed as guardian for dozens of elderly people over the past 3 years. In every case, the person's assets were liquidated, and they were placed in expensive care facilities. "That's legal?" Susan asked, horrified. "Guardianship is supposed to protect vulnerable adults," Johnson explained. "But corrupt guardians can use their power to isolate seniors from their families and steal their assets legally." The system worked like this. Patricia would befriend elderly targets and gradually isolate them from family and friends. She would drug them during court competency hearings, making them appear confused or incapacitated. Morrison would then petition for emergency guardianship, claiming the person needed immediate protection. Once Morrison became legal guardian, she had complete control over the person's finances and living situation. She would sell their property, liquidate their savings, and place them in facilities run by her accomplices. The stolen money would be shared among the network members. "It's brilliant and horrific," Johnson said. "They use the legal system designed to protect seniors as a weapon to rob them." He pulled up more records. "Look at this. Morrison has been appointed guardian in 47 cases over 3 years. In every single case, the person's assets were completely liquidated within 6 months. What happens to the victims?" Robert asked. They usually end up in substandard care facilities with minimal services. Many die within a year or two, often from neglect or depression. The scope of the operation was staggering. Patricia, Morrison, and their accomplices had created a systematic method for legally stealing from elderly Americans. They had refined their technique over years, making millions of dollars while destroying countless lives. The bank employee is Thomas Wright, Johnson continued. He works at Pacific Northwest Credit Union and facilitates the illegal transfers. The care facilities are owned by shell companies traced back to Morrison's husband. As we reviewed the evidence, my phone rang. It was Detective Sarah Rodriguez from the Portland Police Bureau. Johnson had contacted her about the case. Miss Martinez, I understand you've uncovered evidence of a criminal network targeting elderly residents? Yes, I said. They've stolen from multiple families and they're about to victimize someone else. I need you to come to the station this afternoon. We're opening a formal investigation, but I have to warn you, these cases are difficult to prosecute. The perpetrators are skilled at making their actions appear legal. After the call, Johnson looked grim. Detective Rodriguez is competent, but she's right about the challenges. Even with everything we've discovered, Patricia could claim she was legitimately helping confused seniors manage their affairs. What about George Thompson? I asked. His hearing is tomorrow. I've contacted his family, but his grandson lives in Seattle and can't get here in time. Thompson is currently in Morrison's custody at a private facility. Without family intervention, the guardianship will be approved automatically. Maria Chen leaned forward. What if we testified at the hearing, told the judge what Patricia did to our families? Morrison's attorney would object to irrelevant testimony, Johnson explained. Each case would be considered separately. I felt frustration boiling inside me. We had mountains of evidence, clear patterns of criminal behavior, and multiple victims. But the legal system was too compartmentalized and slow to stop the network from claiming another victim. There has to be something we can do, I insisted. Johnson was quiet for a long moment. There might be one option, but it would be risky and potentially illegal. He explained that the only way to stop Patricia definitively would be to catch her in the act of drugging Thompson or forging documents. That would require coordinated surveillance and possibly putting someone in danger. The police can't officially endorse such a plan, he warned. And if something goes wrong, you could face charges for interfering with a legal proceeding. As the meeting ended, I realized that Patricia's network had been successful because they exploited the system's assumption that legal documents and proper procedures meant legitimate transactions. They counted on families being too distant, too trusting, or too overwhelmed to investigate deeply. But they had made one crucial error. They had targeted my mother, and I wasn't going to let them destroy anyone else's family. If the system couldn't protect George Thompson, then I would find another way. Detective Rodriguez met me at the police station that afternoon in a small conference room lined with filing cabinets and fluorescent lights. She was a Latina woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and an air of quiet competence. I've reviewed the evidence your attorney provided, she said. This is clearly a criminal enterprise, but prosecuting it will be challenging. Why? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Patricia and her network have been careful to operate within legal gray areas. Each document appears legitimate on its surface. The victims signed paperwork, even if they were coerced or drugged. Proving fraud requires demonstrating criminal intent, which is difficult when the perpetrators use the legal system itself. Rodriguez pulled out George Thompson's file. Mr. Thompson is 82 years old, recently widowed, and owns a house worth $300,000. Patricia has been visiting him for 6 weeks, supposedly helping him with grief counseling. The same pattern as my mother, I said. Exactly. Yesterday, Patricia brought Thompson to a medical evaluation where he was diagnosed with severe cognitive decline. The doctor who signed the evaluation is Dr. Marcus Webb, who has worked with Morrison on dozens of similar cases. My heart sank. Another corrupt doctor? We're investigating, but Webb's credentials appear legitimate. He could claim he was genuinely concerned about Thompson's mental state. Rodriguez showed me the timeline. Thompson's competency hearing is scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow. Morrison will request emergency guardianship. If approved, she'll have immediate control over his finances. What about his family? Thompson's grandson, David, lives in Seattle. He was notified of the hearing only yesterday, too late to arrange legal representation. Without family opposition, the guardianship will be approved automatically. The system was rigged in Patricia's favor. By the time families realized what was happening, the legal machinery had already ground their loved ones into poverty and isolation. Here's the real problem, Rodriguez continued. Thompson is currently staying at Golden Years Care Center, which is owned by Morrison's husband. He's been given medication for anxiety and depression that leaves him drowsy and confused during the day. So when he appears in court tomorrow, he'll seem incapacitated. Exactly. The judge will see an elderly man who appears unable to care for himself and will approve Morrison's guardianship request. Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. Pacific Northwest Credit Union has already received paperwork authorizing the liquidation of Thompson's accounts. The money will be transferred to Morrison's management account within hours of the guardianship approval. What about his house? Linda Foster has prepared a quick sale to an LLC owned by Patricia. The transfer is scheduled for Friday afternoon. By this weekend, Thompson will be penniless and permanently institutionalized. The precision and speed of the operation was terrifying. Patricia's network had streamlined the process of destroying lives into a matter of days. "Can't you arrest them before the hearing?" I asked desperately. "On what charges? Everything they're doing appears legal." Thompson signed consent forms for his medical evaluation. He agreed to stay at Golden Years. He requested Morrison's assistance with financial planning because he was drugged and manipulated. I believe you, but proving that in court requires evidence we don't have yet. Rodriguez explained the police department's limitations. They needed probable cause for arrests, search warrants for the care facility, and cooperation from multiple jurisdictions. The bureaucracy that normally protected citizens' rights was protecting the criminals instead. "There is one possibility," Rodriguez said carefully. "If we could document Patricia actually drugging Thompson or forging his signature, we'd have grounds for immediate arrests." "How would we do that?" "We'd need someone to witness the crimes directly, preferably with recorded evidence. But it would be dangerous, and I can't officially ask civilians to undertake surveillance." Her meaning was clear. The police couldn't help, but they wouldn't stop me if I found a way to gather evidence independently. "What about tonight?" I asked. "Will Patricia visit Thompson before the hearing?" "Our surveillance shows she visits every evening around 7 p.m., usually bringing medication and having him sign additional paperwork." I looked at the clock on the wall. 4:30 p.m. In less than 3 hours, Patricia would be at Golden Years Care Center, probably administering the final dose of sedatives to ensure Thompson appeared incompetent in court. "If someone were to accidentally be at that facility tonight," I said carefully, "and if they happened to witness illegal activity, would that evidence be admissible?" Rodriguez met my eyes. "Any evidence obtained legally by private citizens would be reviewed appropriately. But I must emphasize that interfering with a legal proceeding or trespassing on private property would result in criminal charges." "I understand." As I left the police station, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Honey, I'm feeling much better today. What can I do to help?" For the first time in days, I smiled. Patricia's network had made another crucial error. They had left Susan Martinez functional enough to fight back, and they had underestimated both of us. If Patricia wanted to play games with legal documents and institutional power, she was about to learn that some battles aren't won in courtrooms or boardrooms. Sometimes justice requires ordinary people to take extraordinary risks. Thompson's life was hanging in the balance, but Patricia's confidence in her system was about to become her greatest weakness. At 6 p.m., I sat in my rental car across from Golden Years Care Center, watching the building through the gathering dusk. The facility looked respectable from the outside. Modern architecture, well-maintained landscaping, and a sign advertising compassionate care for seniors. But I now knew it was a prison designed to isolate victims while their lives were systematically destroyed. My phone buzzed with updates from Johnson, who had been coordinating with Detective Rodriguez. "Police surveillance is in position around the perimeter, but they can't enter without a warrant. Everything depends on what you're able to document tonight." I checked my recording equipment one more time. A small digital recorder in my jacket pocket and my phone set to live stream video to Johnson's secure server. If anything happened to me, the evidence would survive. At 6:45, Patricia's silver BMW pulled into the parking lot. I watched her enter through the main entrance, carrying a small bag that probably contained Thompson's evening medications. I waited 5 minutes, then approached the building. Through careful research that afternoon, I had learned that Golden Years employed minimal evening staff and relied primarily on electronic security. The side entrance near the garden was monitored by cameras but wasn't alarmed during visiting hours. I slipped inside and found myself in a sterile hallway lined with numbered doors. The smell of disinfectant and institutional food hung in the air. According to Johnson's information, Thompson was in room 15, which was located in the residential wing. Moving quietly down the corridor, I could hear Patricia's voice through Thompson's partially open door. She was speaking in the same soothing tone she had used with my mother, but her words sent chills down my spine. "Now, George, you know this medicine helps with your confusion," she was saying. "The hearing tomorrow is very important. You want to make sure you're calm and relaxed so the nice judge can help you." "I don't feel confused," Thompson replied, his voice weak but coherent. "I feel fine when I don't take the pills. Maybe I should talk to my grandson David before the hearing." "Oh, honey, David is very busy with his own life. He doesn't want to be bothered with these complicated legal matters. That's why he asked me and Janet to take care of everything for you." I activated my phone's recording function and slowly pushed the door open further. Through the crack, I could see Patricia holding a small paper cup of pills and a glass of water. "These will help you sleep tonight so you're well rested tomorrow," she continued. "Remember what Dr. Webb said about the importance of your medication schedule?" "I don't remember Dr. Webb saying that," Thompson said, confusion creeping into his voice. "Actually, I don't remember much about seeing Dr. Webb at all." Patricia's tone became slightly sharper. "That's because of your memory problems, George. This is exactly why you need professional help managing your affairs." She moved closer to him with the pills. "Now, be a good man and take your medicine. Janet will be here in the morning to help you get ready for court." I realized this was the moment. Patricia was about to drug Thompson to ensure his compliance during tomorrow's hearing. If I was going to act, it had to be now. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, my phone recording everything. "Mr. Thompson, don't take those pills," I said firmly. Patricia spun around, her eyes blazing with fury. "Who are you? You're trespassing on private property." "I'm Carrie Martinez. You stole my mother's house 3 months ago using the same methods you're using on Mr. Thompson." Thompson looked between us, clearly confused but alert. "What's happening? Who is this woman?" "George, don't listen to her," Patricia said, her voice becoming urgent. "She's mentally unstable. She's been harassing me and making false accusations. I'm going to call security." But I could see fear in Patricia's eyes. She knew she was caught. "Mr. Thompson, what's your grandson's name?" I asked. "David," he replied without hesitation. "David Thompson. He lives in Seattle and works for an engineering firm." "What year is it?" 2024. "Why are you asking me these questions?" I looked at Patricia triumphantly. "He's completely coherent. There's nothing wrong with his memory or cognitive function." Patricia was already backing toward the door, but I blocked her path. "Tell him what's really in those pills, Patricia. Tell him what you've been giving him every day for 6 weeks. "You don't know what you're talking about," Patricia snapped. "Those are prescribed medications for his anxiety and depression. Prescribed by the same Dr. Webb who falsely diagnosed him with dementia? The same Dr. Webb who's worked with Janet Morrison on dozens of other cases exactly like this one?" Thompson was starting to understand. "Are you saying those pills are making me confused?" "Yes," I said, keeping my phone trained on Patricia. "She's been drugging you to make you appear incompetent so her partner can steal your house and your money tomorrow." Patricia made a sudden lunge for my phone, trying to stop the recording. We struggled briefly before she realized it was too late. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," she hissed. "There are people involved in this who won't tolerate your meddling." "Is that a threat?" I asked, making sure the recording captured her words. Patricia's mask finally slipped completely. "Your mother was supposed to be an easy target, a confused old woman with no family nearby. But you had to come back and complicate everything. So you admit you targeted my mother specifically?" "I admit nothing. But I will say this. There are 5 other families who tried to interfere with our business arrangements. None of them were successful." The cold threat in her voice made my blood freeze, but I pressed on. "Tell Mr. Thompson about Janet Morrison. Tell him about the care facilities and the forged documents. Shut up, Patricia snarled, all pretense of kindness gone. You have no idea how carefully we've planned this operation. Thompson will be in Morrison's custody by noon tomorrow, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Actually, said a familiar voice from the doorway, I think there is. Detective Rodriguez stepped into the room, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Patricia's face went white. This is entrapment. She lured me here under false pretenses. Miss Reynolds, Rodriguez said formally, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and illegal administration of controlled substances. As the handcuffs clicked around Patricia's wrists, she turned to me with venomous hatred. You think this is over? Morrison has your mother's paperwork. She can have her committed permanently whenever she wants. My heart stopped. What are you talking about? Patricia smiled coldly as the officers led her away. Check your messages, Carrie. I think you'll find your mother needs your immediate attention. Rodriguez was already on her radio, dispatching units to arrest Morrison and the other network members. But as I fumbled for my phone, I saw 3 missed calls from Susan and a text message that made my knees buckle. Honey, that nice woman Janet came by with some papers. She says there was a mix-up with my living situation and I need to come with her to straighten it out. I'm not sure what's happening, but she seems very official. I'll call you later. The message was sent 45 minutes ago. Patricia had outsmarted me. While I was focused on saving George Thompson, she had triggered a backup plan to eliminate the one witness who could connect her to months of crimes. My mother was gone. I raced through Portland's evening traffic, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Detective Rodriguez was coordinating with multiple units, but we had no idea where Morrison had taken my mother. Pacific Northwest Credit Union, Rodriguez said over the phone. Their night manager just called. Morrison and your mother are there with a bank officer, attempting to transfer funds from several accounts. At 8:30 at night? Morrison has emergency authorization to access her ward's finances outside normal hours. It's another part of their scam. They conduct the major thefts when other businesses are closed and fewer witnesses are around. The bank was downtown, a 20-minute drive that felt like hours. My phone rang constantly with updates from Rodriguez's team. They had arrested David Chen at his notary office and Linda Foster at her real estate agency, but Morrison was the key to the entire operation. Carrie, Rodriguez said during one call, I need you to understand that your mother is in real danger. Morrison can't afford to let her testify about what Patricia did. These people have committed multiple felonies and they're facing decades in prison. What are you saying? I'm saying that people who've already destroyed dozens of lives won't hesitate to eliminate witnesses. We need to approach this very carefully. When I arrived at the bank, police cars were positioned around the building, their lights dark to avoid alerting Morrison. Through the large windows, I could see 3 figures inside. Morrison, my mother, and a man in a suit who was presumably the bank officer. Rodriguez met me in the parking lot. Morrison is claiming your mother requested emergency access to her accounts to cover medical expenses. She has signed authorization forms and proper identification. How is that possible? The same way Patricia's network has been operating, sophisticated forgeries backed by someone who understands the legal system intimately. Rodriguez showed me surveillance footage on her tablet. My mother appeared alert but frightened, signing documents while Morrison watched closely. The bank officer seemed genuinely helpful, unaware that he was facilitating a crime. What's the plan? I asked. Morrison is armed and extremely dangerous when cornered. We can't risk a direct confrontation while your mother is inside. So what do we do? Rodriguez looked grim. We wait for them to come out, then arrest Morrison before she can harm your mother or escape. But as we watched, Morrison's behavior inside the bank became increasingly agitated. She was pacing and checking her phone repeatedly, clearly aware that her network was being dismantled. She knows, Rodriguez realized. Patricia probably had a way to warn Morrison if things went wrong. Suddenly, Morrison grabbed my mother's arm and pulled her toward the bank's rear exit. They're running! Rodriguez shouted into her radio. All units converge on the back of the building. But Morrison had planned for this contingency too. A white van was waiting in the alley behind the bank. By the time police units reached the area, Morrison and my mother had disappeared into the maze of downtown Portland streets. We have a hostage situation, Rodriguez announced over the radio. Suspect is Janet Morrison, armed and dangerous, traveling with Susan Martinez in a white Ford van. For the next hour, police helicopters circled overhead while patrol cars searched the streets. Morrison's phone was turned off, making her impossible to track electronically. Finally, Rodriguez received a call that made my heart stop. Morrison wants to negotiate, she told me. She's at the Riverside Warehouse District with your mother. She wants all charges dropped and safe passage out of the state in exchange for releasing Susan unharmed. You can't agree to that. We won't. But we need to buy time while our tactical team gets into position. Rodriguez handed me her phone. She wants to talk to you. Morrison's voice was cold and controlled when I answered. Carrie, you've caused considerable problems for a very profitable business operation. Let my mother go. This is between us. Actually, it's much bigger than that. Your mother can identify Patricia, myself, and several others involved in what you might call a regional enterprise. She's become a liability that needs to be managed. What do you want? Initially, I wanted to continue our business without interference. But you've made that impossible. Now I want safe passage to a non-extradition country and $1 million in untraceable funds. I don't have that kind of money. But the families we've serviced do. Consider it a collection of debts owed for services rendered. Morrison's twisted logic was terrifying. She genuinely believed that stealing from elderly people was a legitimate business deserving protection. I'll need time to arrange the money, I said, stalling. You have 30 minutes. After that, your mother becomes a permanent solution to a temporary problem. The line went dead. Rodriguez was already coordinating with her tactical team. The warehouse district is mostly abandoned buildings and narrow streets. Morrison chose well, multiple escape routes and minimal police coverage. What are our options? Officially, we try to negotiate until our snipers are in position. Unofficially, Morrison has killed before when her operations were threatened. My blood ran cold. She's killed people? 3 suspicious deaths in the past 2 years, all elderly people who became problematic for her guardianships. The coroner ruled them accidents or natural causes, but the pattern is clear. I realized that Morrison had already decided my mother's fate. The negotiation was just a delay tactic while she planned Susan's murder and her own escape. I'm going to the warehouse, I announced. Absolutely not. You're not trained for hostage situations. But I know Morrison's psychology. She's proud of her operation and wants recognition for how clever she's been. If I can keep her talking about her crimes, maybe she'll make a mistake. Rodriguez considered this. Our behavioral specialist thinks Morrison wants to justify her actions to someone who understands their scope. She might be willing to confess if she thinks she can still escape afterward. Then let me try. Rodriguez handed me a small recording device. This transmits everything to our command center. Keep her talking, don't make any sudden movements, and trust that we'll get you both out safely. The warehouse district was dark and empty, filled with the shadows of Portland's industrial past. I found the address Morrison had given me, a 3-story brick building with broken windows and rusted fire escapes. I entered through the main door, which was propped open. Morrison's voice echoed from the 2nd floor. Come up slowly, Carrie. Keep your hands visible. I climbed the metal stairs, each step echoing through the empty building. The 2nd floor was a large open space filled with old machinery and shipping containers. Morrison stood near the far window, holding a gun pointed at my mother, who was tied to a chair in the center of the room. Mom, are you okay? I called out. I'm fine, honey, Susan replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. But I think this woman has some serious mental problems. Morrison laughed. Mental problems? I've created a multi-million-dollar enterprise that's operated successfully for 3 years. I've helped dozens of confused elderly people transition to appropriate care while ensuring their assets were properly managed. You've stolen from families and destroyed lives, I said. I've provided services that were needed. Do you have any idea how many elderly people live alone with no family support? How many die forgotten in empty houses while their money sits unused in banks? Morrison's delusion was complete. She had convinced herself that elder abuse was actually elder care. What about my mother? She wasn't alone or forgotten. Your mother was a perfect example of the problem. Living alone in a house too big for her, managing finances she didn't understand, taking medications incorrectly. Patricia provided companionship and assistance. Patricia drugged her and stole her house. Patricia helped her transition to a more appropriate living situation and ensured her assets were properly invested. I needed to keep Morrison talking while Rodriguez's team got into position. "Tell me about George Thompson," I said. "How was stealing his house helping him?" Morrison's eyes brightened with pride. Thompson was becoming increasingly isolated and depressed after his wife's death. We provided grief counseling, medical care, and financial planning. His guardianship would have ensured professional management of his affairs. Professional management that somehow resulted in you controlling his money. Who else was qualified to make those decisions? His grandson lives in another state and visits twice a year. Morrison genuinely believed her own propaganda. She had rationalized a criminal enterprise as a social service. "How many people have you helped this way?" I asked. 47 successful guardianships in 3 years. Over $5 million in assets properly managed. Dozens of seniors receiving appropriate care instead of living dangerously alone. "And how much of that money did you keep?" "A reasonable fee for professional services. The care facilities, legal work, and administrative costs were significant." Morrison was describing systematic theft as if it were estate planning. "What happened to the people who tried to interfere with your help?" "Some families were ungrateful for the services we provided. They made legal threats and tried to reverse properly executed guardianships. And those people died." Morrison's expression hardened. "Elderly people die, Carrie. It's unfortunate but natural. 3 people in 2 years, all right after they tried to expose your operation. Correlation isn't causation. Although I will say that stress from family conflicts can significantly impact senior health outcomes." The cold threat in her voice made it clear that my mother and I were about to become additional health outcomes if Rodriguez's team didn't act soon. "Why did you target my mother specifically?" I asked. Patricia identified her as an ideal candidate. Recently widowed, living alone, valuable property, adult children living far away. The preliminary assessment suggested minimal family interference. "But you were wrong about the minimal interference." Morrison smiled coldly. "Yes, you became a significant complication. But complications can be managed." She raised the gun toward me. "Your mother is going to have a tragic accident tonight. She'll fall down these warehouse stairs while trying to escape from a kidnapper." Very sad. But these things happen to disoriented elderly people. "And me? You'll be found shot by the same kidnapper, who unfortunately escaped. Portland has a serious crime problem, you know." "Rodriguez knows where I am," I said desperately. "Detective Rodriguez will find 2 bodies and evidence pointing to a drug-related kidnapping gone wrong. She'll investigate thoroughly but won't find any connection to legitimate business activities." Morrison was moving toward my mother, her gun still trained on me. But she had made one crucial error in her planning. She had underestimated Susan Martinez. While Morrison had been explaining her twisted logic, my mother had been working quietly at the ropes binding her hands. Years of knitting and needlework had made her fingers nimble and strong. Just as Morrison reached Susan's chair, my mother's right hand came free. In one quick motion, she grabbed the cup of coffee Morrison had been drinking from the table beside her chair and threw its contents directly into Morrison's face. The hot liquid caused Morrison to stumble backward, momentarily blinded. Her gun discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as she clawed at her eyes. I lunged forward and tackled Morrison while she was off balance. We crashed to the floor together, fighting for control of the weapon. Morrison was stronger, but I was younger and desperate to protect my mother. The warehouse suddenly filled with the sound of boots on metal stairs as Rodriguez's tactical team stormed into the room. Morrison released the gun and raised her hands in surrender as red laser dots appeared on her chest. "It's over," Rodriguez announced as her officers secured Morrison and freed my mother from the remaining ropes. As paramedics checked us for injuries, Morrison made one final attempt at manipulation. "You have no idea what you've destroyed," she told me. "We provided valuable services to people who needed help." "You destroyed families for money," I replied. "And now you're going to prison for the rest of your life." Rodriguez confirmed that the entire network had been arrested. Patricia, Morrison, Chen, Foster, Wright, and Dr. Webb were all in custody, facing multiple felony charges. More importantly, every piece of stolen property was being returned to its rightful owners or their families. "George Thompson is back in his own home," Rodriguez told me as we left the warehouse. His grandson flew in this morning, and they're working with your attorney to reverse all of Morrison's actions. What about my mother's house? Patricia Reynolds never legally owned it. The sale documents were forgeries, which means your mother never actually lost title to the property. You should be able to move back in within a week once we finish processing evidence. 3 days later, I stood with my mother on the front porch of her house on Maple Street. The yellow roses I had brought from London were long dead, but Susan had planted new flowers in the garden Patricia had trampled. I'm thinking about staying in Portland, I told her as we sat on the porch swing my father had built 20 years earlier. What about your job in London? There's a marketing firm here that's offered me a position, and I want to help other families who've been targeted by criminals like Patricia's network. Susan took my hand. Your father would be so proud of how you fought for our family. I learned it from watching you and Dad. You taught me that some things are worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the people trying to take them away. Attorney Johnson had helped me establish the Martinez Elder Protection Foundation, which would provide legal assistance and advocacy for seniors facing financial abuse. We had already been contacted by families in 3 other states dealing with similar criminal networks. Detective Rodriguez had been promoted to head a new elder crimes task force that was investigating similar operations across the Pacific Northwest. Early evidence suggested that Patricia's network was part of a much larger criminal enterprise that spanned multiple states. But those battles would wait for another day. For now, I was content to sit with my mother in the home she had almost lost, watching the sunset over the neighborhood where I had grown up. I love you, Mom, I said. I love you too, honey. Thank you for bringing me home. The most important lesson I learned from our ordeal wasn't about criminal justice or elder abuse prevention. It was about the power of family bonds to overcome any obstacle when people refused to give up on each other. Patricia's network had counted on families being too distant, too busy, or too trusting to fight back effectively. They had made a fatal error in judgment. They had targeted a family that believed in protecting each other, no matter what the cost. Have you ever had to fight for someone you love when the system seemed stacked against them? What would you do if you discovered a loved one was being manipulated by criminals who used legal documents to steal everything they owned? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about real people overcoming impossible odds, and share this with anyone who might have elderly family members who need protection from predators like Patricia's network. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in courtrooms or boardrooms, but in the hearts of ordinary people who refuse to let evil triumph over the people they love. Stay vigilant, stay connected with your family, and never underestimate the power of one person who's willing to fight for justice.